Hello and welcome to CTU Alumni, a podcast from the Czech Technical University in Prague about our amazing students and graduates from all over the world who have gone on to do big and beautiful things. My name is Caleb House. I'm an International Relations Coordinator at CTU, and I'm here to talk with our international alumni who have completed English top programs to find out why they decided to study at CTU, what their experience was like, and most importantly, where are they now? Let's jump straight in with today's guest. So we're very pleased to have on the podcast today Akshatha RAVI KUMAR, a citizen of India, and you came to Prague in 2018 to study at CTU. So thank you very much for coming to be on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here. First of all, I think it's a pleasure. And yeah, I've been here in Prague for 6 years now. This is my 6th year. I came to Prague to do my master's. I studied at the Faculty of Architecture. And I graduated in 2020, the COVID year. So it was quite an experience, I must say.
We're definitely going to get to that because I know that must have been not the ideal time to graduate or to be abroad studying at all. But to give everyone some context, can you tell us just a few quick things about your life before you came to Prague, like what your upbringing was like, your early education, and what, leading up to the decision to go abroad and to come to Prague?
So, for me, I'm from a city called Bangalore, which is a capital city in South India. And moving abroad and doing a master's abroad is actually a very normal thing in India. So most of the parents want it for their kids because they think that's something that you must have in your academic line to go out and do your master's. But most importantly, I think it's the experience that counts. In terms of academia, yeah, sure. But at least speaking for my family, it was more about the experience of going out and picking up a thing or two on being independent and just learning survival by yourself when daddy's not around to pick you up all the time.
So when you were growing up, did you feel like that was something kind of expected of you, that at some point in your education you would go abroad?
Absolutely not. I mean, for me, at least my family, my mom and dad, they've been super supportive about anything that I've always wanted to do. And in fact, I was the delusional child. At one point, I wanted to study fashion designing.
Why not?
And then at one point, I wanted to be an artist. At one point, I didn't know what I wanted to do. But the interesting thing is throughout all of this, they were super supportive. They're like, yeah, okay, whatever you want to do, go for it.
That's really cool.
But my dad is into the same field. He deals with a lot of construction structures and things like that. So it was sort of a natural manifestation, I would say. My mom is an interior designer. So I've been seeing them work for a while. And the whole environment was quite familiar for me. So it was a safe bet.
But I imagine when you started to consider studying abroad that Czech Republic is not what a lot of Indian students are thinking about or Indian parents thinking about as a study destination abroad. So how did this come about? Like the idea that you should go abroad for your master's in general, I guess this is kind of in the air for Indian students. But how did you even find that it was an option to study in the Czech Republic?
Okay, this is actually a question that I'm always asked. Like ever since
Why are you here?
Yeah, why are you in Czech Republic? I mean, you're from India. What are you doing here? And also for architecture, it becomes even more specific because I see a lot of students who come here to study information technology, for example, or even automobile. And it makes a lot of sense because they have these really huge establishments here. But for architecture, it was always quite... There is no specific story, but I must tell you that if you belong to an Indian family, and you want to do a master's abroad, the first thing by default is, okay, you're going to either America or you're going to Australia. And if you are a bit experimental, you will go to UK. And that was very, very weird for me always. I was like, why? What is this stereotypical nature saying everybody has to go to America? And I don't want to throw mud on it, but also at the same time, the thought never interested me a lot. And I think I also had or I would say I was carried away by a very strong desperation of doing something very radically different.
You found it.
So yeah, I remember when I was making a list of the universities that I wanted to go to, and I was supposed to tell my parents about it, saying, hey, do you want to fund my academia maybe? And they're like, yeah, okay, sure. Why don't you actually think of moving to America? Because I already have some extended family who live there. And I think my parents found it a much safer thing to do, saying, okay.
Ironic.
Yeah. Known waters. So let's just think about that. And I was like, no, I want to go to Czech Republic and I want to study in Prague. And I still remember I had an uncle who came to me and he said, why do you want to go to Czechoslovakia?
Of course.
And I was like, that was 30 years ago. You have to update yourself. But also, these are the things that actually kept me more motivated to come here. It's a very disastrous way to plan your future, I know.
The rebellious way.
Yeah, but it's not something very sustainable. So I had a lot of negative feedback about it rather than something positive, because it was something that people didn't want to do. And you always have your A-listed universities, especially when you're from India, you automatically have this list. And none of those universities were on my list. And I'm pretty sure my parents were quite shocked, but also they were riding the wave. So
they must have been pleased about the expected costs also. Like, this is kind of a balance to the decision. Like, oh, well, in that case, maybe it will be a much more affordable option for our daughter. Well, so you made your selection against all the feedback and advice of the people around you. You managed to get here. I imagine that coming from India, even a huge city in India, and arriving here, that there were some surprising things. So your very first reaction to the city and to academic life in the first few weeks, or let's say first couple of months?
I would say I was massively excited, and that was the wave I was riding. That was the only... and this energy actually lasted in me until I finished my master's, surprisingly.
Great.
I had nothing planned. I didn't have a very high hope on what I wanted to do in the future. I didn't think about it. I mean, I know this is not something very motivating for kids who actually want to plan their academia. But also, the only thing that I thought about was I was actually looking forward to it. I was super intrigued by the thought that I would be in a completely different culture that nobody understands in my context, and I would be the first one to do it. So that was something that was very interesting for me, rather than someone who gave me a catalog on how to survive. That was something that I opposed always. And I would say it was quite okay economically also. One of the most important things that I thought about was, I don't want to go to a completely expensive city and live like a poor person there. Because the life of a university student is always very minimal. So I didn't want to have things that were worse for me. I just wanted to live comfortably and also learn new things. So I think Czech Republic was quite, I would say, perfect for that.
And so then looking back on that 2-year experience as a master's student, what are your kind of overall impressions of that time? Let's do the hits and the misses, the highlights and the biggest challenges that you faced during your time studying at CTU.
Okay, so I would say it was not just at CTU, it was Prague in general.
Sure.
Because communication, first of all. The minute I entered Prague, I couldn't read a single board. Because for some reason, now we do see a lot of communication in English, I must say, over the 6 years. But I think 6 years ago, things were quite different. Like, especially my trip from the airport to the dormitory was chaos. I remember getting off the flight with 2 big bags, and I was like, okay, I have to find my way to the dormitory now. Now what? And it was so chaotic, but also at the same time super exciting. I think this is a very personal opinion, I would say. A lot of students might be very, very distressed by this entire process. But for me, it was very, very exciting. And but to answer your question, I think communication is the first thing.
You mean the language barrier?
The language barrier. Like for me, I speak only English. And apart from the other Indian languages that I can communicate in. And And that is the biggest challenge that I had in Prague. I still do have it, especially when I have to deal with, let's say, something to do with the regional office or the government entities. It's quite challenging. But apart from that, as long as you're in the university premises, it's never been a problem. You meet students who all communicate in English. Your professors talk to you in English because you're part of an international community, and also the course is international. And even if it is a tech course, people do communicate in English. But I would say that's a two-way process. You have to make them feel comfortable so that they feel comfortable giving you the information that you want. You cannot walk up to anybody and demand things. And I think grounding is one factor that keeps you afloat in university. So you ground yourself, you repeat yourself, you're polite, and you make the other person feel comfortable that they can open up, and everything is easy.
That sounds easy enough. Not sure it's that easy for everyone, but
I mean, I had practice.
Yeah. So you got through the 2 years of your master's degree and you graduated. What was that moment like? It sounds like it was a very specific moment in time when you graduated. What were you thinking about? Was it very meaningful for you that you had completed your master's degree in a foreign country? Did that feel like a big accomplishment, or were you pretty much just focused on what's coming next because it was a very chaotic time in the world, 2020?
I mean, I must say, I am a very petty person. So I don't dream big. I am a dreamer for sure, but I don't dream very big into the future. So at that moment, my only biggest disappointment that I had was that my parents couldn't attend my graduation.
Right.
And it was quite funny because everybody was worried about the jobs that they had to find. It was the first COVID wave. And my only concern was, oh, damn it, my parents are not going to be here and I can't graduate. Now what? So I think we had very different bars on what we wanted. But also at the same time, COVID had its own plus and minus, at least for me. It gave me a good time frame to think about what I wanted to do. I was a fresh graduate. I had every possibility to do something different if I wanted to. But the only thing was I was still in the heat of the moment, and I didn't actually think about if I want to do this, if I don't want to do it. I now have a master's degree in architecture and urbanism, and what next? So I think the most organic thing to do would be go find yourself a job, basically. But for me, I was also thinking about leaving the country. I was thinking about actually moving somewhere else. I was like, okay, I came here to do my master's. I finished my master's in 2 years. Yay, success. And what next? Maybe I can do something else. Maybe I can move to another country. But it was tedious for travel, and it wasn't even in the option spectrum. So it gave me a good amount of time to think about what I wanted to do. And I remember my first job was, I was an English teacher in a high school. So I was teaching teenagers English. And this was my... it wasn't a part-time job, it was my full-time job. But I was also thinking about how I want to establish myself in the field of architecture because nobody was hiring. And I had a good amount of time to send my application to a lot of offices, get massively rejected because it was the timing. Nobody was hiring. Yeah. The fact that you were good, not good, do they want you, do they not want you, wasn't even in the ideology there. It was just, we don't have vacancies because we don't have work.
Right.
It's as simple as that. So that's when I realized that I actually have a keen interest for teaching. I actually enjoyed the job a lot. And that was something that I didn't think of previously. It just happened. It was I applied for a lot of jobs, and this was something that came by my way, and I took it immediately because why not? And as I was looking for my architecture job, I was also enjoying teaching a lot. So that is one discovery that I made. But also I would say I sort of thank people here for that because especially in India, if you study architecture, you would be employed in architecture. But I think in Prague, or I'm not sure if it is a European thing to do or it's a global thing to do. You can study whatever you want to study, but if you are capable of doing that particular job, sure, go ahead and do it. They give you an opportunity. Mm-hmm. I don't have any qualifications to be an English teacher, but I still taught English in a high school. So that was quite nice. It was a good opportunity to think about different things. And now I do work for an architecture office. I work here as an architect and designer and an urban planner for a Czech office. And it's been super nice. But this thought saying I can also teach is something that is still in me. Also, one of the major reasons why I took a PhD is because I really somehow found myself very attached to academia even after I left. So it was quite nice.
I think a lot of people who move to a foreign country for what is planned for a limited time, they realize that it opens up new branches of the road that they would never imagine before, and you end up in a very different place than you expected. You probably didn't expect to stay here after your master's degree, but now you have a job as an architect and you're doing a PhD still at CTU. Did you consider doing your PhD somewhere else since you already did your master's at CTU?
To be honest, I didn't even consider doing a PhD in the beginning. I would actually thank my then vice dean and now supervisor, Professor Irina Fialova. I remember on the day of my master thesis, I finished my defense, and then we were outside, we were talking, and she came up to us and she's like, but you guys should also consider maybe a PhD, why not? And I laughed at it back then. I was like, no way, I finished 2 years of academia, I'm not getting back into this place. No, not again. But it was quite ironic because I thought about all of this during the COVID phase, and there were all just a lot of thoughts put together about teaching, about academia, and what are the things that I really want to do, and where do I want to get to with this. And then my next very impulsive move was to write to the student coordinator a year later saying, do you still have these opportunities for international students? And they're super supportive. They're like, yeah, of course. And I think the next day I had a huge email with all the information that I needed about it. And I was like, this is so nice. I mean, I graduated a year ago and they still remembered me. And you have so many students every day at university at the student's office. But these people actually know each person by the name. And when I wrote to my ex-student coordinator, she's like, yeah, sure.
Nice. That's really great. So you're doing your PhD studies and working at the same time. Can you tell me a little bit more about your job, what your role is? And I'm always interested in the day-to-day work. So what does your day of working as an architect in Prague actually look like?
I would say in the beginning, I stereotyped it to be very boring. But that's also because I would say both myself and the company, we've been learning together. So my office didn't actually have a lot of international candidates before. I would say, okay, their definition of international was quite different. It was purely European candidates, and they didn't have anybody from overseas before. So I was the first. I think I'm the only Indian who's ever worked there so far. And now we get a lot of applications from people from all over the world, and they do consider looking at it. But they did take up the initiative of saying, hey, okay, why not? Let's try it. And I was the trial guinea pig. So it was quite nice. And in the beginning, I didn't enjoy it so much because I was massively lost. I would say a lot of times when you move from your country to another country, and the first thing you experience in a foreign land is a culture shock. I didn't have a culture shock when I was at university. I was very comfortable going to university, being there every day. I was at the student dormitory throughout my academia for masters. And it was really nice because the thing about CTU is it's a very diverse community. Like Prague 6 is like another country by itself. It's like a Prague inside of Prague, I would say. It's so different from the other parts of Prague because you have students from everywhere. And that automatically makes you fit in. You don't feel so alien to the community. And everybody is trying so hard to put out their best. So you somehow feel very warm and you fit in. And also, I think you feel very protected in this atmosphere. But the biggest culture shock that I had was when I joined my first work. It's like I was left alone and now I was away from home. You don't have someone to watch you and send you emails about your every move. It was something that my student coordinator did. She took it up as a personal task. You don't have professors that you want to run to with your small petty problems. And also you don't have friends. Like your co-workers are not your friends. A lot of people might disagree, but there is a boundary.
Here it's often the case, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, it's just you and what you do for work, and now you're professional. How is that going to work for you? So that's when I actually had my first culture shock. Not in terms of the people and culture, but in terms of how you cope up with this entire environment. But luckily, my office has been super, super supportive. I've been here for 6 years, and I'm not proud about the fact that I don't speak any Czech. I do understand, but it's quite hard for me because it's a completely different context. But they've been very patient. And I would say they've also learned how to deal with the international community, like how I have learned to deal with the Czech community. So we meet halfway. And I would say the same thing also about university. And probably a lot of friends that I've made here. We're all learning every day about different things, how we deal with different situations. I know a lot of times my office was put in a very tricky visa situation because of me. But now they learn and they can deal with a lot more. So it's just one of the examples,
In terms of your work, how prepared did you feel academically by your previous studies, especially at CTU? Did you feel like studying architecture at CTU then prepared you to be an architect in the Czech Republic?
If I understand correctly, are you asking me if university actually prepared me for my career?
I know that's a dangerous question, but yes, I'm going to ask you that.
I have to be brutally honest, absolutely not. But I wouldn't say this is a CTU thing. I would say this is a university academia thing in general. I don't think any university in the world can prepare you for your career. The maximum they can do is they can be instrumental about talking to you about experiences and purely personal experiences that they have felt. But when there is a shift from you being a student to you being a professional, it's purely on your experience. And there is no university that can explain to you about it. And CTU is no different. In fact, they made the whole, let's say, working career, you being a professional, sound very pleasing. And they made it sound like it's something that you are looking forward to. And I disagree.
I think this is usually a difficult transition, definitely.
Yeah.
What's next for you? Where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years? Do you think that you'll still be here? Do you want to move to a different country, to go back to India? Where do you see yourself?
Oh, this is a very... I haven't thought about it. This is a tricky question for me. At the moment, I have my PhD going on. So I think I'm here for the next 2 years. Nothing's going to change. Unless I think of taking up an Erasmus program or something like that, which would be quite temporary. But also your PhD sort of paves the route to what you're going to do next. So I would say it should happen more organically. I don't have a plan. To answer your question, I don't have a plan. And I know this is, again, a bit tricky because a lot of students who are doing the PhD already know what they want to do with it. But for me, I just want to see how it goes. It's literally how I moved to Prague. It wasn't planned.
Well, every student experience is different and everyone has their own path. But if there are people listening who are considering studying at CTU, they're thinking that might be the right path for them. Is there anything that you would say to them, any advice or things that they should think about when making that decision?
Okay. So if you had asked me this question, let's say 3 or 4 years ago, I would say, I would think about it.
Okay.
Because things were very different. Like I mentioned earlier, communication was so hard.
Yeah.
And I think communication is a key to anything. Like if you cannot communicate and make yourself clear, anything is going to sound very hellish wherever you are. It doesn't have to be a country where people speak English as their main native language. So 3 years ago, that was my perspective. But now I would say, why not? Because along with me learning every day and me trying to cope with the whole situation and new context, I think also university has done a very good job. Because
CTU specifically.
CTU specifically. I mean, I would speak only in terms of CTU, because when I was here, I think I was here with another friend who was also from India. We came together. We were the only two Indians here, along with one senior student from India. So I am saying India in specific, but then I would say also a very global community. I see that development now. It's like a good transition from master's study to PhD study, which has happened over like 6 years now. But in that 6 years, along with me changing my perspective about academia, I think also CTU has come a long way. So they've also been learning. So why not?
We all need to keep learning.
Yeah.
Akshatha, I think we're going to have to end there, but thank you very much for spending the time with us and telling your story. We feel very lucky to have an alumni like you. And from CTU, we wish you the very best in the next chapters of your career and your life.
Thank you so much. I'm humbled.
And to close out the podcast, could you say goodbye to our viewers in your native language?
Okay. I think that's sort of interesting. I mentioned earlier that I'm from Bangalore. And in Bangalore, we speak Kannada. So to everybody who can understand Kannada, ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ಈ ಪಾಡ್ಕಾಸ್ಟ್ನ ನೀವು ಖಂಡಿತ ಕೇಳಬೇಕು.